Misfits, and welcome. In today's video, we're talking all about the dragon turtle and why it is so lacking in this edition and what we can do to fix it. It's funny, I always had this idea that the dragon turtle was this super powerful, significant foe. I've even run it in one of my games before, but after that encounter, I remember being kind of really disappointed in how that encounter went. It was really time-consuming, but it wasn't really that challenging for my players. And then when I was making my Kraken Week video, and I was coming up with all these sea monsters and trying to decide what my favorites were and which ones were really powerful foes for your party to face, the dragon turtle just didn't make the cut, and when I really sat down and studied the stat block, I understood why. And then I started looking into how it stacked up in earlier editions, and realized that a lot has changed about the dragon turtle over time, and I want us to talk about it and see if there's maybe a way we can fix this monster so that it lives up to the legend. And of course, I'm in a different space. I have finally moved in, but I have not completely unpacked, so no art is on the walls, there are still things in boxes, so you're just gonna have to kind of like deal with that for a little bit. I'm working on it, hopefully it will get done. Of course, the bookshelf that's normally behind me isn't here right now, it's getting a fresh coat of paint, so eventually we will get back to a sense of calm and the house will be put together. We're just not there yet, so just be a little patient about that. Okay, so before I get into what I don't like about the dragon turtle now, I want to talk about what it used to be. So, the dragon turtle first makes its appearance in original Dungeons & Dragons back in 1974, and by all accounts that I have read, this was a really, really powerful monster and a really fearsome beast. It had all the abilities of regular dragons, but it couldn't fly, and of course it would be slower on land because it's in the water. It had a steam breath weapon that could deal damage equal to its current hit points, and that, honestly, the idea of that is kind of insane. So obviously, this original iteration of the monster could easily lead to a TPK. It then shows up again in basic D&D in 1981. In this edition, they are still ridiculously powerful. So powerful that their entry includes a note to the Dungeon Master that's sort of cautioning them to only use this monster for a very high-level party. And its bite alone could deal anywhere between 10 to 60 points of damage. And its breath weapon is still able to deal damage equal to its current hit points. And just wrapping my brain around that, it's like, alright, these earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons were kind of insane. Then we move into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And this is kind of the first instance of the dragon getting debuffed just a little bit. Its hit die gets reduced, its bite attack gets cut in half, its breath weapon is shrunk. It's still a really, really fearsome foe, though, and an ancient dragon turtle in this edition could have as many as 112 hit points, which is almost on par with that edition's version of Tiamat, which I think had 128, so it's still a really powerful monster for that edition. Then we move into 2nd edition. So it comes back in 2nd edition in 1989. It's still deadly in this edition, but there is a pretty big change starting in this edition. The breath weapon is no longer tied to its current hit points. It's just sort of like a set number of d6 that it does. I think it's 20 d6, but I'm not entirely sure. And its breath weapon here is a 60-foot cone. And then we move into 3rd edition and 3.5. So the dragon turtle appears in both. It gets a revision in 3.5, and it actually gets beefed up there just a little bit. So its AC goes from 20 to 25. It gets some skill bonuses. It gets some new feats. Its breath weapon does shrink. Again, it shrinks to 50 feet, but it can use it every 1d4 rounds, which is pretty scary. So then we move into 4th edition. And I honestly need y'all's help. I can't tell if this monster appeared in 4th edition at all. I know it gets mentioned in some lore, but I could not find an official stat block for the dragon turtle for 4th edition. So if you know of one, definitely leave me a comment about that below because I'm very, very curious. This is a heavily debated edition of Dungeons & Dragons, so if there is a stat block for it, I would really like to see how it compares. Now, it potentially not showing up in 4th edition at all, or just being so hard to find, might be why so many changes were made to it in 5th edition. Perhaps that's like an explainer, I'm not sure. But let's talk about the most current version of the Dragon Turtle, and we'll talk about some of the things that I like about it, but there's also just like so many things that I just don't quite understand, so let's get into it. So the Dragon Turtle in 5e is meant to be a really powerful foe. It's a CR 17 creature, it has an AC of 20, and it has 341 hit points. It is a really, like, beefy monster. It's gonna take a long time to wear it down, but in the encounter that I put it in, that was kind of the only thing. It just took a long time to take down. It gets multi-attack, so it can make 3 attacks, 1 with its bite, 2 with its claws. It could also make a tail attack in place of its 2 claw attacks. All of these attacks are plus 13 to hit. The bite is 3d12 plus 7, so ouch, that's definitely a lot. The claw is 2d8 plus 7, and the tail is 3d12 plus 7. So these are powerful attacks, and they deal a lot of damage. The Steam Breath is a 60-foot cone. It's a DC 18 con save, and then you take 15d6 fire damage on a failed save. So it's a really powerful breath weapon, but of course it's a breath weapon, it's recharge 5 to 6, so you have a limited chance of getting to do this again, so that's something to keep in mind. Now let's get into the stuff that I just really don't like about it. So up front, this is a really powerful beast. It has a ton of HP, it takes a long time to fight, its attacks are heavy hits, but most of the time when you encounter this creature, you're probably gonna be on like a boat, so it might not even be able to actually attack you, the character, with any of these things. It might get you with the breath weapon, but some of these attacks are probably gonna be targeted at whatever vessel you're on. So that's something to keep in mind. I mean, I guess there's definitely scenarios in which you would encounter this and you're not experiencing some amount of safety on a boat, but I don't know, it just leaves some things to be desired here. And we're going to talk about the fact that you would probably encounter it while you're sailing, and why this stat block doesn't make sense for that. So the number one thing that I just find baffling is the fact that this dragon, this powerful dragon, has no frightful presence. So every single adult dragon, every single ancient dragon has frightful presence, something that you have to make a save, and if you fail that save, you're afraid of this creature, and that is a huge thing to have to deal with in combat. Being afraid is going to give you some serious disadvantages that are going to make it harder to attack this creature and be effective in combat. The CR and hit points alone for the Dragon Turtle make it on par or more challenging than a lot of other adult dragons, so I really don't understand why it doesn't have frightful presence. That's kind of like a staple of dragons, so I'm a little confused about that. Number 2, the Dragon Turtle doesn't have blind sight. So this is weird because every dragon has some form of blind sight. Even young dragons have a limited form of blind sight. So the Dragon Turtle not having this is just so strange. And this is actually how my table was able to just sort of cheese their Dragon Turtle encounter. There was like a spear embedded in like the head of this Dragon Turtle they were fighting. They cast darkness centered on that spear, which put the Dragon Turtle's head in magical darkness, so it was not able to see them anymore, and then all of its attacks were a disadvantage. I just don't understand why this monster doesn't have blind sight. It's a weird choice. The Dragon Turtle has no legendary actions and no legendary resistances. So my same argument about the lack of frightful presence applies here. you know, adult dragons and ancient dragons have legendary actions and resistances. So it's really, really surprising that this monster doesn't have them when it's comparable to these other types of dragons. And I keep bringing up the adult dragons because the dragon turtle is a CR17 and an adult red dragon is also a CR17. So they should be comparable in a lot of ways. And it's just so surprising that there are so many things that the adult red dragon has that the dragon turtle just doesn't have at all. So I'm really surprised that they don't have legendary actions or legendary resistances. That really messes up with the action economy. So even though the dragon turtle has a ton of hit points, it's still, if it's just the dragon turtle alone facing off against your party, there's a good chance that just all of their actions against it are gonna tip the balance in favor of the party, not the dragon turtle. And so it's very easy for them to, you know, once they weather getting hit by some of these attacks, they can just come back with their own and outnumber it and be successful. So that's just something that's really frustrating that it just doesn't exist for this stat block. Number 4, there are no layer actions for the dragon turtle. Layer actions are another thing that adult dragons and up are going to have. And personally, I think the fact that the dragon turtle is sort of like the lone sort of sea-based dragon is a huge argument for it to have its own layer and have its own layer action, so I'm really surprised that it doesn't have that. At the very least, I think it should have some regional effects, like some of the sea monsters from my Kraken Week video, just something along those lines. It's just really surprising that it doesn't have that. And number 5, the dragon turtle is not a siege monster. So siege monsters in D&D are monsters that deal double damage to objects and structures. And a lot of big gargantuan monsters also tend to be siege monsters. And it's just so weird that the dragon turtle isn't one of those, because what is it most likely to encounter? Ships. Ships are objects and structures. It should be dealing double damage to ships. The majority of the sea monsters in my Kraken Week video were siege monsters, and several of them were siege monsters even though they were much lower CR than the dragon turtle. So the fact that this monster isn't one seems like a huge oversight. It just makes me wonder if they were really even paying attention when they put together this stat block. So what can we do to fix it? So basically, we need to just go through and add back the things that are missing. It needs to have frightful presence. I feel like that's a given. And for a lot of these, I think we should probably look to, like, the adult red dragon stat block is a good sort of rule of thumb. Because it's very, very similar. It definitely, we gotta add back the blind sight. It should at least have 60 feet of blind sight. But if you want to have different types of dragon turtles, if you want like the base dragon turtle that we're beefing up to be more like an adult dragon turtle, and then have like an ancient dragon turtle, then the ancient dragon turtle could have a higher range of blind sight than 60 feet. It should absolutely have legendary actions and legendary resistances, so I would highly recommend adding those back in. And of course it needs layer actions and should be a siege monster as well. With all of those changes, it's a much more formidable foe, and it actually lives up to the hype. So with these changes made to the dragon turtle, giving it back all the things that it lacks, it changes from being basically a CR17 creature to a CR21 creature, roughly-ish. I'm using the CR calculator to kind of figure out a lot of this, and as we've talked about in previous videos, the CR number 4 or 5e leaves a lot to be desired. So this is like roughly what it ends up being. It's not a perfect system, but that gives you a better idea, and that makes this more of the monster it's supposed to be. A monster that used to be kind of on par with Tiamat, but is now just sort of like a bag of hit points, you know? It just needs to be a more formidable foe. Editing Amanda here just to point out that Fizban's Treasury of Dragons does exist. Now, a lot of people still don't buy like D&D books and stuff anymore since the whole OGL thing, so you might not understand or realize that this book exists, but it does, and its goal was to really like revamp a lot of the dragons and make them feel more interesting and deadly. And I totally forgot that they definitely have a stat block for the dragon turtle, and man, am I glad that they do. So while the base dragon turtle in the monster manual is still super lackluster, the ancient dragon turtle stat block in Fizban's book is actually kind of everything that I want this monster to be. While the ancient dragon turtle doesn't get blind sight, it does get true sight for 120 feet, which is great. I am surprised that it still doesn't have the fear, the frightening presence that other dragons have, but a lot of the other stuff here makes up for it. This gives it special abilities. It has this blessing of the sea that can recharge. So if it's reduced to 0 hit points with this blessing, its hit point total instead resets to 350 hit points, and it recharges its steam breath. So this is like a crazy thing. This is really going to make this feel like a end of campaign monster. And here it does get legendary resistances, it also gets legendary actions, and there is like a section here for mythic actions, which I think you can use mythic actions if you've used this blessing ability that it's got. It seems really, really interesting. This one takes the steam breath back to the 90-foot cone that it used to have in earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons, and with its legendary actions, you know, it can attack, it can move, or it can use something called a boiling aura. So the dragon turtle radiates intense heat until the start of the dragon turtle's next turn. Whenever a creature starts its turn within 20 feet of the dragon turtle, that creature must succeed on a DC 24 Constitution saving throw, or take 9d8 fire damage. Being underwater does not grant resistance against this damage. If we look at the mythic actions, you can only take these if you have used the Blessing of the Sea ability, and these would sort of swap out with the legendary actions if that blessing is in effect. So their mythic actions would be a bite, or they can use Armor of the Storms, and this costs 2 actions. So Armor of the Storms, lightning temporarily surrounds the dragon turtle. It gains 40 temporary hit points until the start of its next turn. Until all these temporary hit points are gone, any creature that touches the dragon turtle or hits it with a melee attack takes 4d12 lightning damage. This is really what I want this monster to be. I'm glad that this version exists, but I'm frustrated that it's not necessarily the easiest thing to find. You're gonna have to buy this book in order to get access to this particular stat block, and like, it's already kind of iffy on buying books from Wizards of the Coast, you know? That's the reason why I forgot about this stat block. I don't have this book because all that OGL stuff happened and I stopped buying D&D books. So it's annoying that the base dragon turtle that they put out with the monster manual is like so lacking in a lot of ways. Like, the only thing it has going for it is how many hit points it has, and it's like, that doesn't make a monster tough. That just makes it a really long, drawn-out fight. You know what I mean? Alright, let's get back to the video. Alright, well that's all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, if you like this channel, if you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. That stuff really, really helps me out. But with all of that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and I will see you again next time. Little bit of a different setup here. I'm adjusting. New place, different camera, sort of different mic setup. So we're just sort of seeing how it all turns out. Be interested to go back and edit this and see how we compare to the old place. But yeah, super excited to be in an actual house. It's nice that I can be in a separate room from my dog, and I don't have to time my videos to like when the washing machine or the dishwasher isn't running because of the sound and stuff. It's worked out really nice. The one downside is, you know, found a snake in the backyard yesterday, so that was not fun, but that's okay. But yeah. The campaign, Misfit's campaign, is coming back this Friday. I think that will be episode 62, so be on the lookout for that. And of course, don't forget to go check out my Kraken Week video. It's in the big old Kraken Week playlist, so be sure to go check that out. And if you missed it, I did a review and playtest of Zombie Road RPG by Dragonmount Press. We had a lot of fun playing it and getting to look at it early, so make sure you go check that out. Alright guys, have a good day.